Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanako Overhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is Alan Carroll. Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast.
Thank you, Wanako. Thank you very much. Enjoyed being here.
So I like to ask my first-time guests, how did you come to see the world the way you do today?
I purchased the Course of Miracles books about 50 years ago, Wanako, and looked at them briefly, and then about 47 for 47 years I didn't touch them. And then I pulled them off the shelf, and for the last 3 years I have been pretty much daily studying the Course of Miracles, which talks about the nature of reality. And I find that the way the Course of Miracles describes the nature of reality very much is an alignment and understandable for me. So I would say in the last 3 years, my ability to understand the concepts in the Course of Miracles got clearer and clearer and clearer, which has been very, 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 very nice.
So what was your first impression when you saw it the first time? And then what got you to return to A Course in Miracles?
Operating intuitively. Intuitively, you look at it and you say, "Oh, this is pretty good stuff," but for whatever reason, it didn't catch my attention. Then 3 years ago, I was listening to Eckhart Tolle on his YouTube, and I listened to him quite a bit. And he just decided one day to talk about the Course of Miracles because he had followed it and people were asking him about it. And I went home, I pulled them off the shelf, and all of a sudden it got my attention. And because of that, I have been following it and studying it. And I went through, it took me 2 years to go through the workbook. It says, a lesson a day, but I'm not a lesson a day kind of guy. And I finished it in about 2 years, and I decided to go back and do it again. And so 6 months ago, I went back again and started again. And this time, the teacher that I used was David Hofmeister. And I found his teaching and reading and the text to be, well, it's sort of funny. It's like I'm doing the lessons again, but when I read the lessons now, some of the lessons I have to ask myself, did I do that lesson? Is that because it's sort of new stuff, but especially the text. I didn't use the text the first time, and the text really, adds another depth of understanding to the Course of Miracles. So I'm doing it again for the second time, and I'm enjoying it even more the second time.
Yeah, the text is very, very profound. So there's a lot to look into and to discover about oneself and about the way one sees the world. So since you've gone into it, how has your view of the world changed?
My background is psychology. My degrees and licenses in psychology, and I would describe myself, Wanako, as a transcendental psychology. Transcendental means the human, which is the study of human consciousness and how it relates to the nature of reality. And the Course of Miracles is right in that area. And the understanding of the idea that there's a competition going on between the way my ego sees the world as separate and the way the Holy Spirit sees the world as connected. And you realize that I've spent, 70 plus years, looking at the world from the ego point of view of everything is separate. But the Course of Miracles talks about the idea that the Holy Spirit includes everything. It's not a separate thing. It includes everything. And the idea that you now are the whole that contains everything, and you have that power within you if you can reach out and ask for it to come through you, requires a little bit of faith that you are going to relinquish your ego's judgment, and you're going to no longer rely on the ego's judgment, and you're going to kick it over to the Course of Miracles and says, hey, what would you suggest that I do in this situation? And then listen to whatever thoughts come to my mind and execute on those thoughts. And I find that that is fun. That's a very interesting way of playing the game, and it also gives me a feeling of understanding, a feeling of peace, a feeling of being connected, and not needing to defend anymore. Don't get upset anymore. I'm more relaxed, and I find that my research project it validates everything the Course of Miracles talks about. And I want to add that at first I thought the text was difficult uh, because it was so many pages. It's 600 pages. It's very thin. There's so much information, but it's actually written in a step by step by step by step process. So I feel that they're really just talking to me, and like they say, and right now you are probably experiencing this, and that's exactly what I'm experiencing. So it's like, wow, this fellow who wrote this thing really is in tune with where we are and what we need to do in order to progress down the spiritual path.
Yeah, another aspect of it is that it came through psychologists. A Course in Miracles found its way into the world through psychologists. So I see it as a psychology written in Christian language, basically, and I think that's a very interesting thing. And another thing is the transcendental psychology that you were speaking of. This connectedness, everything is connected. There's experiences that are combined experience of everyone, of all that is, and all these aspects, and how one gets into these states of mind in which you can access that, right? Which is also part of transcendental psychology. Like, I mean, one of the methods was the breathing techniques. The other was at the beginning, they used certain drugs to do it. I think it's a very fascinating thing to see the parallels, what transcendental psychology discovered and what these two psychologists brought through in A Course in Miracles.
Well, to add to that, the idea of when when I'm talking, when my ego is speaking, I'm talking to you, and when my being or my higher self is speaking, I'm talking to myself. So right now, Wanako, I'm not talking to Wanako. I'm talking to me. And if I'm talking to me, how would I speak? And the Christian tradition is such that I was raised in a Christian background, so I've heard all the stories that you have in the Christian tradition, and the idea of we are all connected, and the idea of they know not what they do, the idea of forgiveness, the idea of compassion, the idea of generosity, the idea of caring and kindness just flow out when you begin to practice the Course of Miracles, and I think it's cool.
Yeah, there is so much in it, and the idea that we are we need to see each other as whole. In other words, see ourselves as whole, or that actually the world is within us is also something that A Course in Miracles speaks about. And that idea that the world is within us and that we are actually not the idea of separation, that the world is a projection of, but we are actually something that we can only experience and not really describe, because the world we see is a description of separation. So we need to, and in Course in Miracles, it speaks of it needs to be reinterpreted for the purpose of the Holy Spirit to bring us back home. And so we're walking each other home, as A Course in Miracles says, and that entails learning to see each other differently. Yeah.
I look at it as you can have an ego vision, or you can have a spirit vision. And you can almost use the analogy of wearing a pair of glasses. And how are you going to perceive, using the word perception you brought up, how are you going to perceive the world? And it is just a way of changing your belief structure, which you can choose any belief structure you want. Uh, so that's what's one of the nice things about the Course of Miracles, and is that you're not locked into your conditioned way of looking, the way you were raised, your family, the environment, the country, the religion, all the things that have conditioned the way you see the world are all concepts that uh, you can alter the concepts. You can choose how you want to view the world. The challenge, though, is that you have to be awake in order to make the choice. And most people are I would say, are in the dream of thought, rather than waking up in the dream and realizing that, wait a minute, I can choose what trains of thought I want to follow. I can choose, Wanako, what words I want to speak. And I can choose, do I want to attack and defend my point of view because someone has offended some part of my identity? Or do I want to uh, let my Holy Spirit, let my blessings, let my joy and compassion flow out and look at people from a different way, and a lot more compassion for what people do? And so the idea of being offended now or being attacked by other people is, you no longer, well, I no longer get upset by other people and what they do, because you realize that you don't have to do that. And when you get upset, it physically affects your body, it mentally affects your body, it emotionally affects your body in a negative way. And so therefore, wow, why would I choose to attack you rather than choose to have compassion and forgiveness? So my physical body remains relaxed, the thoughts are calm, and my actions are more, what's the word I want? The actions are more of responding to what is happening out there in the event in front of me, rather than doing that instant reaction to what's going on. And the reaction is based on your conditioning. And if you can choose a different conditioning, you can choose a different reaction, which is the choice would be a much more positive spiritual choice rather than an ego choice.
Well, another question that comes to mind, because you are a psychologist and probably offer people psychological counseling, how have you been able to integrate the ideas from A Course in Miracles into your practicing with and supporting clients?
My I have a podcast that I've been doing for a couple of years now called the Mindful You podcast. So I get to talk to lots and lots of people who are on the mindfulness journey. And several of them are involved in or have touched the Course of Miracles. So I hear different points of view and different ways it's integrated. And yet the idea of the holy presence, the holy instant, the idea of being in the moment, the idea of presence, the idea of emptiness, the idea of stillness, the idea of being anchored in the moment and not being caught by thoughts of the future or thoughts of the past. And and what I do in my practice is I train public speakers. And when I train public speakers how to speak, I point out to them that, and I'll demonstrate to your audience that if I wanted to, I could increase the amount of empty space between the sounds that I'm making. I can change my words per minute. Right now, Wanako, I'm probably speaking at about 150 words per minute. And if I choose, which I will, to reduce the number of words per minute by inserting little tiny spaces of emptiness. You can call it a pause. And to be able to speak to you now and at the same time control the stopping and the starting of my speaking requires me to be in the holy instant. I have to be in the moment. I can't be thinking about dinner. I can't be thinking about breakfast. I can't be thinking about yesterday. I can't be thinking about now. I have to be in this moment in order for me to disrupt the conditioned pattern of my speaking. And when you do that, you wake up. You wake up from that dream of thought. And it's exactly like waking up at night in your dream. And if you wake up in the dream and you realize that you're dreaming, that's going to be called a lucid dream. And when I disrupt the pattern of my speaking, it wakes me up in the moment. And I have time now to make that choice I was talking about, the choice of how I want to interact with you, what I want to say. And if I have a choice and I'm interested in joy, love, peace, the things that Course of Miracles talks about, I can actually create it in this moment by controlling my tongue, the tongue of the ego. And now I can speak for the Holy Spirit rather than speak for the ego because I can now control the timing of my speaking and I can choose to vibrate the air with love rather than vibrate the air with defending my point of view about the thing that you said, which does not produce health and joy and positive feelings. It's detrimental to that.
So was it on purpose that your camera was off a few times, or was it off?
My camera on this side, Wanako, went off about 10 minutes ago, and I find if I press a button, I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't want to lose you. I'll play with it a little bit, but
Now it disappeared, and
yep, it disappeared. That's why I don't want to
press.
press anything. It's
You need to press it again, and then you'll be back. Press
well,
the video symbol.
I will give another. I will give it another opportunity here. This is
Okay. So what you're saying is that you're back. So when you consciously shift from the way you were speaking with fast voice and quick intonation and so on to a slower pace, it brings you back into the present and enables you to express things differently that wouldn't have been possible otherwise, or because you would have all these other things going on in your mind if you were not consciously needing to pace yourself. You turned your mic off.
Most people that I've worked with over the last 50 years in speaking, at first, when they begin the class, don't even know that there's a space between the sounds. And Eckhart Tolle once again talked about the size of that space. And he said that if you took all the things into space, all the galaxies and universes, and you took all the planets and the asteroids and the stars and all those things, and you compressed them down, they would represent less than 1% of the total. The other 99% is just empty space. And when you look at your identity, you notice that your identity, my name is Alan, this is my body, these are my thoughts, these are the things I like, these are the material objects. They're all things, they're all concepts. And yet 99% of who I am is empty space. So if I can create empty space between the sounds that I speak, my space statistic goes up and my constipated things statistic of talk, 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 talk goes down. And so I become more spacious. And as you become more spacious, the analogy that I use, Wanako, is the idea of a screen door in the summertime and a storm door in the wintertime. In the storm door in the wintertime, when the wind blows, the door resists the wind. In the summertime, when the wind blows, you have the screen door, and the wind flows through the screen door. So there's no resistance to the outside events. So as you become more spacious through meditation, for example, or through mindful speaking, you become physically less resistant because you created a screen door for life rather than a storm door for life. So the screen door would be analogous to the Holy Spirit, and the storm door would be analogous to the ego, because the ego resists, the Holy Spirit doesn't resist. The screen door sees things in the big movie. The analogy that I use, Wanako, is the Star Trek analogy of the USS Enterprise in Star Trek has something called a holodeck. A holodeck is an immersive virtual reality experience. And when you look at the world through the holodeck, you realize that what you're seeing is a projection of your conditioning, of your thoughts being projected out in front of you. And you think that the things out in front of you are separate from yourself. But the Course of Miracles clearly talks again and again and again and again that what you think and what you see are the same things. So if I want to change the world without, I need to go into the world within and begin to look at, well, what is the thoughts that I'm thinking, that I'm seeing outside of myself, and if I could change those thoughts I'm thinking inside myself, would it alter my experience of the outer world? And the answer is absolutely yes. And people have the power to begin to close their eyes, begin to manage their breathing, and begin to explore the inner realms, and begin to create that space between the thoughts that you think through meditation, through mantras, but you can also increase the space between the thoughts that you think. But let's say that again. The difficulty is that it's difficult to control and create spaces between the thoughts that you think, because that's inside yourself, that's the ego, and that's the mind talking, that's the mind thoughts. But you can create spaces between the thoughts that you speak. And the thoughts that you speak just a second ago were the thoughts that you were thinking. So if you can practice pausing between the thoughts that you speak, it will disrupt the conditioned pattern of your speaking, which is the ego, and will allow you to disrupt the thoughts that you're thinking and free you from the compulsiveness of the automatic reaction to the things and the events. And if you can disrupt the automatic reaction, you now are no longer automatically operating yourself. Like you're no longer automatically driving your car in an automatic gear. You can now drive your car manually. You can now choose what you want to say. You can choose how I want to vibrate the air. And one of the stories that I like is the story of Mozart's music. And they were playing Mozart's music in the greenhouses. And they were looking at the plants growing in the greenhouses, listening to Mozart music. And then they were measuring the plants in the greenhouse, separate greenhouse, that were playing very hard, heavy music with a deep, deep beat and acid rock music. And they noticed that the plants significantly grew better listening to Mozart's music. So I would suggest that that's true to the way we speak. When we speak, we're vibrating the air with our words, and we can vibrate the air that makes the flowers grow, love and kindness and compassion, or we can vibrate the air with selfish greed, me, my, hold on to, defend, attack. I can vibrate the air that way, and it's a it's a it's a serious problem because the way you vibrate the air creates physical reactions in your body. So Sadhguru says that 99% of the physical issues that we have with our body is caused by the thoughts that we think. So the thoughts create the behavior that creates the tension in the body, that creates the disease, that creates the cancer. So as you begin to manage the thoughts that you think and manage the thoughts that you speak, you'll notice that you physically, mentally, and emotionally put yourself in a healthier environment.
Yeah, that's an important point, that the way we I find that an important point, the way we think and the way we feel about things. Of course, in Miracles is always saying the way you see the world it makes the difference, because you're projecting it, and so the way you think about it also changes the way you experience it. So it's really important to pay attention to what's going on. And it also speaks about what is sickness. And of course, in Miracles, it says that sickness is a defense against the truth. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you say the word Wanako defense, and immediately you have to put yourself into what the ego is doing. So the ego is defending its identity, and its identity is an illusion. I mean, most people think that they're their body, and most people think that they're their thoughts. Well, you're not your body and you're not your thoughts. You're that 99% of empty space, but you think you're your body and you think you're your thoughts. Your thoughts formulate your opinion and your belief structures and your points of view. And so if you say anything to me, my identity, which offends my point of view, it's going to cause me to get upset. But I'm getting upset about an illusion, because the Course in Miracles will say, wait a minute, that is an illusion. The truth is that you are the Son of God, that you are a part of the Creator. And what I love about that is it validates a lot of the things that I didn't understand when I went to church. I didn't understand the Garden of Eden, the fall from grace, the idea in the Garden of Eden, everything is harmonious, everything is connected, which is the way we'd like it to be. It's all loving and harmonious, and everything is together. We're no longer separate. Like that's the state of consciousness that we want. But the problem there is that uh, God told Adam and Eve, you're welcome to stay in the Garden of Eden, which is like heaven, the Garden of Eden, but you can't eat from that tree over there, the tree of knowledge. And because the tree of knowledge has fruit, and the fruit is the fruit of good and evil. So if you eat from the fruit of good and evil, you're no longer in harmony, and you'll be kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Now there's another tree. The other tree is the tree of life, the tree of immortality. You can eat fruit from that tree all day long. That's a timeless, spaceless environment uh, where you can eat from that tree. However, the story goes is that Eve the serpent gave the directions to Eve to eat the apple. Eve eat the apple. All of a sudden, she knew what was good and bad, and then she gave the apple to Adam, and Adam ate from the apple, and all of a sudden, that now have the understanding of what's good in the big movie on the holodeck, and what's bad in the movie of the holodeck. And today, when you ask people, all right, look outside yourself and you tell me in your movie of life that you're seeing from the time you were born to this moment of now, it's like being in a movie and watching a movie. What are the things in the movie that are good? And what are the things in the movie that are bad and evil? And everyone can tell you that. People, this is good. This is bad. This is right. This is wrong. Well, that's because you're eating from the good. Eating right now, 2024, we eat from the tree of good and evil, the fruit of good and evil. And the Course in Miracles says you don't have to do that. The Course in Miracles would say that you can through atonement, asking for forgiveness, you can begin to stop eating from the tree of good and evil, which means that you're giving up judgment. And most people look at the ego as one of the things that the ego can do. Ego gets to judge. I get to judge what's right and wrong in my reality. And Course in Miracles says you give that up. You don't get to judge him. You can ask the Holy Spirit, who's your companion and guide, what you should do or how you should react, what action should you take in this moment of now. So you no longer have to judge. And when you no longer have to judge, you no longer eat from the tree of the fruit from the good and evil. And all of a sudden you are returning to the grace of God. And that's the direction you want to go, rather than live under the grace of the ego, which causes suffering. You want to live under the grace of God, which causes liberation, love, compassion, and I'll call it enlightenment.
There's a lot in there. And the idea that A Course in Miracles shares, that there's the ideas of separation, which are made up, and the idea and the truth, which is not made up, which is actually wholeness and oneness, and there's no judgment in that. Yeah. So you actually are moving to what you were calling this open space without any restrictions.
Yep, that's exactly a way of looking at it. There's no resistance. The challenge with resistance is people use the word love, and the best definition of love that I got was from a gentleman named Werner Erhard. He was the founder of the S training back in the 70s, which changed into the Landmark Education Corporation, which is, I believe, the largest private training organization in the world right now. And he talked about love, and he said love is giving something the space to be the way it is and the way it isn't. And when you look at the movie that you see every day when you wake up and you send your five senses out there into the world, what you see, hear, feel, touch, and smell, all those things, you see it, and there's things in the movie that you don't like. There's things that you are resisting. Like you don't want that in the movie. That shouldn't be. That if I had it, I would erase that from my movie because I don't like that. So if there's things in the movie in the outer world, relationships, grievances are very, very important. Of Course in Miracles, you have to be able to let go of the grievances. And when you let go of the grievances, the way the Course in Miracles says you let go of grievances, and the way the practice of the Holy Spirit, which is the research project, you want to practice being the Holy Spirit. The main practice of the Holy Spirit is forgiveness. And so when you see those things in the movie that have happened from the past that are stored in memory or that are happening right now, rather than resistant, you take a look at and you begin to forgive, and you forgive yourself, you forgive other people, and all that energy that you were using to hold those things together begin to melt. And Mooji, Mooji, talks about the idea that people are like an ice cube and they're in this warm bowl of water, and they begin to slowly melt into the water. And that's the feeling of going from the ego to the Holy Spirit, is that the ego is this ice cube of me and my identity. And all of a sudden now I'm relaxing and chilling out a little bit and letting things flow a little bit more, less resistance, and you begin to melt. And as you melt, you begin to move from that 1% of just a something in the space of the universe to, wait a minute, is it possible for me to be the 99% of the universe? And when you're there, you have this incredible love and compassion and forgiveness, and you've achieved that state of we'll call it enlightenment. You can call it heaven, heaven on earth. I believe that this is heaven on earth, and if you don't see it as heaven on earth, it's not that it's not heaven on earth. It's just that you have a belief structure that you still see things that shouldn't be there because you're judging good and evil, and as you begin to practice the tools and look at the way of perceiving, you begin to relax, and physically, mentally, and emotionally, you find you are enjoying the ride through life rather than resisting the ride through life.
Yeah, this idea of accepting what is quite challenging. And the other idea, because it's not really, because it's a projection, so it can that's why there's this idea also that it just disappears and changes, and then you see something else, and at some point you no longer are seeing with the eyes of the idea of separation, but through that lens that doesn't actually have reality. It's something, actually, I think A Course in Miracles even goes to the point to say it's not real, it's an illusion, and it doesn't really exist. Only the truth exists. So actually, it disappears because it was just a projection of a thought of a rigid system that isn't actually real, that is basically dead, and it's just repeating itself in whatever ways it wants to, in very different ways. So we're getting to the time where we need to start wrapping up. So is there a question that I haven't asked that you would like to answer?
A question that you have not asked me that I would like to answer. I would recommend that in order to achieve, I'll call it higher state of consciousness, a more spiritual state of consciousness, it takes practice. It takes time devoted to the Course in Miracles, for example, devoted to your meditation, devoted to your whatever technique you want to use. I use meditation and yoga, and I do it every day. Sadhguru is fantastic. He has the Isha ISH Foundation. worldwide, millions and millions of people. He has training programs and meditation programs. A lot of people do, but that's the one that came to my mind because I do it myself. To have a practice that you do regularly. And the practice for me is to take the time every day to practice becoming still. So when I practice mindful speaking, by putting those spaces, I no longer vibrate the air with sound. And what you hear when there's no sound is stillness. Taking a deep breath creates stillness. Relaxing your body creates stillness. So having a time every day that you can practice becoming still would be a very, very important step on your path of discovery, on your path of enlightenment, is having a practice in which you become still every day.
Wonderful. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, how would they do that? Is off. You have to turn your mic on, Alan.
You can reach out to me through my website, www.acamindfulu.com. You can listen to my podcast, Mindful You, and you can hear people from all over the world talk about their mindfulness journeys. And those are two ways you can reach out to me and connect with me.
So thank you so much for joining me and joining us all in the journey of walking each other home. And thank you everyone who will be watching and listening, and thank you all for supporting this podcast and making it possible. If you want to be on the podcast, please reach out to me. And if you have people you would like to have on the podcast, maybe you can tell them about it. And if you like the podcast, please review it and let people know about it so that more people can find it. So blessings to you all, and till next time.